Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Ryan here alongside Caleb. This is our Wednesday night weekly podcast that we do every Wednesday in our off season of no severe weather from October to about March or so. So if you're just joining us, feel free to kick back and listen. We're going to talk about some topics across the weather community tonight. I'll also interact with you guys, talk about some things in terms of MSC, and also just kind of hang out and just enjoy ourselves tonight. So this is a laid back atmosphere. We're going to ask respectfully with the election yesterday, please do not talk about politics in chat. Okay. If we have moderators in here, they will take care of you. Avoid it at all costs, please. Okay. Make that loud and clear to start the night. No politics. All right. With that being said, though, we're going to open up chat here. We're going to talk with you guys for a bit. We also have a few things we want to have some fun tonight in terms of common weather misconceptions and myths. So we're going to have a brief time for that. And if you guys have any old wives' tales, perhaps, of weather forecasting, stuff like that, drop them in chat. Let's discuss them. We're going to break things down for you, talk about what's true, what's not true, and go from there. So what's up, A-Rocker, Fordo, Tommy, got Penny, Dawn, Kevin, Cindy. What's up, guys? Good to see you all in here. So we have a few things to talk about in terms of the upcoming weather. Now, I want to start with a common weather misconception that a lot of people actually believe in. And it's more so a generational pass down. But I'm going to go ahead and start this off by saying the woolly bear forecasting myth for winter. Now, a lot of you may look at a woolly bear or caterpillars in the fall time, and some people will say that it can be a precursor to what kind of winter we may have. I think the tale goes that the more darker the color the caterpillar has, the worse winter it's going to be. If there's more dark up front or there's less dark at the end, it's going to be a harsher beginning to winter, but yet a milder winter to end. So the dark color there, I believe, really kind of dictates what people think the winter may have in store. But that is a common misconception there. They actually do not, surprisingly. It's a really good, it's a correlation that I think is pretty clever. But scientifically speaking, there's very little, if any, correlation to caterpillars and their colors in winter. Now, I will say that some animals in general, as we get closer to winter, they can kind of have that sense sometimes. But that's a really common, should I say, evolutionary trait that animals have with them, that they know it's coming. So it doesn't really matter that it's going to be harsher. Yeah, they're going to prepare either way. They're going to prepare because they know the cold season's coming, just like birds fly south. That's another one we can talk about. You know, they know cold is coming, but the colors on a caterpillar do not. So that's an example of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So if you guys have any misconceptions or questions that you may have about those types of forecasting, what's the word I'm looking for? Misconceptions, or if you guys have anything that your grandparents taught you or anything that you think or anything you want to know, let us know in chat here.
Ashley's got a funny one. Don't kill Daddy Longlegs. It rains if you do, allegedly. Well, if they're in my house, I'm sorry, Ashley. They're getting taken out.
So we got a whole list of these tonight we can talk about,
Yeah.
but we're going to try and rely on chat here tonight. We don't want to take too much off topic. So if you guys have anything, feel free to shout it out here. We're going to be live for about 45 minutes or so, give or take 15 minutes. We're going to try and make it about an hour long in length, but let's have fun. Let's have some fun tonight.
Yeah, and a lot of times, these weather myths are based on I guess, a smidgen of truth a little bit. There are some correlations that, somebody saw, years ago. Hey, well, this just happened to be on the same day or the same winter when we had these things happen. And a lot of times, that's kind of like how myths and legends, they're based on truth, but they're embellished a little bit. Or, the game of telephone was passed down throughout the years, and here we have these myths or wives' tales that are passed on from generation to generation. And some of them are actually fairly clever too. But then as technology and just understanding as weather as a whole has really come along in the last 50 years, even in the last 15 years, to where the science has just exploded into a wealth and a plethora of knowledge to allow us to really dive in to say, okay, well, that's true, but this is definitely not true. So definitely a lot of that too. But they're fascinating nonetheless.
So Fordo has a good one in here. Does red sky in the morning mean sailors should take warning? So that's a hard one because the red sky in the morning can be caused by a lot of things. So not always. However, there is some truth to that. When we have red in the sky, that usually means that there's more so in the way of moisture available. So sometimes it can be true. Yes, it kind of indicates rain could be coming. But in terms of really bad weather, I don't think there's much correlation with that one. But it could mean we have rain coming. But I mean, it's a saying for the sailors because it obviously means that there's some correlation there, at least to some rain or precipitation. So yeah, I'd say it's mostly true, but it doesn't always mean we're going to get bad weather. So Kevin has a good one here that my grandma actually mentioned to me when I was a kid. And I'm not sure if this is an actual color it turns, but I don't know. I'll give my take on this. Kevin says a real old one, when the leaves on trees appear silver, it is a precursor to rain. So what I've noticed a lot is just in general, when you have a big leafy tree, usually when storms are coming, the wind picks up. And the backside of the leaves oftentimes can be, a whitish timber color. So that's the correlation that I make between it. But overall, the color of leaves do not change themselves. It's just more so you're seeing different part of the leaf that is being kind of blown in the wind.
Yeah, to build on that. So the backside of the leaves, so maple trees, for example, the bottom side are often a little bit fuzzier, and that's where you get that white color from, just from the hair follicles on the leaves. However, a lot of times they flip over when you get a nice southeast wind out of the southeast. And a lot of times when we get those winds, it means a cold front's approaching or a frontal system or boundary is approaching from the west. We have a system getting ready to move in that's causing those winds to back out of the southeast. So a lot of times those leaves will flip, and you'll see that off color. Does it always mean rain? Not necessarily, but sometimes it is a good precursor that we have nice southerlies and maybe a frontal system is getting ready to move through. So, yeah.
A-Rocker, I have not heard that one before. Can the amount of acorn fall indicate a more intense winter season?
See, my grandpa always would say the bigger they are, the harder to winter. But really the correlation between that isn't really there per se. Same thing with maple seedlings and other seedlings and other fruit producers. Not really an indicator there. Now, acorns, if you have a really wet season, acorns can grow quite ginormous with the amount of water uptake. Those cotyledons inside the acorns can actually swell pretty large, and you can get pretty large acorns. But is that really an indicator as to what winter we're going to have? Not necessarily. It's just a lot of times it's really a story of how the growing season was, not really what the winter season is going to do. It's really just telling you the story. Was it a good year? Was it a dry year? So on and so forth. And how fat the squirrels will be this winter.
A-Rocker says you can in fact smell rain. Yes, you can. I just learned this a couple of weeks ago. Some people cannot smell rain.
And on that, so rain actually doesn't smell. So what you are smelling is actually microorganisms in the soil. They react to moisture. So if you have your sprinkler on, sometimes you can smell that a little bit, but it's actually, rain doesn't have a smell. It's the soil. It's microorganisms living on the soil and on the surface that you're smelling. When they get wet, they put off an odor, and that is actually what you're smelling. It's a biological smell. From those microorganisms living in the soil. It's actually very cool. And it's a refreshing smell too. I mean, I don't know of anybody that doesn't like the smell of rain. It's just a fresh smell.
Mm-hmm. So Skylar has a good question here. Not a myth, but what does the Farmer's Almanac use to predict? Seems like they always say a bad winter. So I
They
don't
do.
know the exact things they forecast off of, but I do know they forecast it way too far in advance. I do know that they do take into account like solar cycles, historical patterns, stuff like that. Um, but one thing I will say about the Farmer's Almanac is typically it's very inaccurate. Some people say we had a lot of people in our comment section say last year it was completely accurate, but I went back to 2023's winter outlook and it had us in cold and snow, and it was a record warm and record low snow year for us. So it just goes to show you like these forecasts that they do put out, I wouldn't trust or put too much weight in the farmer's
Yeah, not a
almanac.
lot of scientific data goes into that because if you think about it, how early can you buy, let's say, a 2025 Farmer's Almanac? You can buy those over the winter time. And we don't even know exactly what winter 2024, 2025 is going to do yet 100% because that data isn't available. So when you're putting together a yearly outlook, your really historical data is really all you can go off of because there's no other data available anywhere to really give you a full interpretation of what the season is going to be. So that's kind of why it's fun to read, it's fun to look at, but would I use it as a weather forecast? Absolutely not.
It's been pretty cold. I'm actually drinking hot chocolate now, says Crystal. Yeah, it's kind of cold up there, especially if you're in the western and northern parts of Michigan. Over here in southeast where I'm at, we've had 65 degrees all day long. It's been quite nice outside. So I can't complain about it over here in the eastern side of Michigan. How come some winters the snow is fluffy and sometimes hard and you make snowballs? So that's a great question. So that depends on your temperatures in the atmosphere. And that is all it comes down to. Some years will have a little bit more of the warmer type of winters. I have more wet snow, but really it comes down to the temperatures of that particular snowstorm. So when we have not drier, when we have a more like fluffy snow, we call it a drier snow. That is usually what happens when the temperatures are colder. Well, when temperatures are close to that freezing mark, 30, 31, 32, that's when we have the more wet type of snow. So that's why we have fluffier and wetter snow in very simple terms. It all comes down to the temperatures.
Yep.
Where do you guys draw the line on the Michigan map where up north snow starts, aka deeper, more consistent snow? I believe it starts anywhere past Mayo. The snow belt really up there is pretty much north of Mount Pleasant, I'd say, north of
Yeah.
Cadillac, those areas. Further south, you got lake effect, yeah, but overall, I think the snow belt would call it further north.
But again, it's a winter by winter basis. I mean, look at last year, even in the UP, there was a lot of freezing and thawing to where like a lot of people go to the UP to sled just because the snowpack is deeper up there from lake effect and clipper systems. Last year we didn't really have that. A lot of trails were worn down very quick. So I mean, really it's just a season by season thing, but I jump on board with Ryan and say really north of Mount Pleasant is where you have your more consistent snowpack for the winter season. A lot of times our rain snow lines really like to develop there in the southern half of the state. Again, it's really system dependent, but I'd say a safe bet the northern half of the state for your more consistent snowpack.
Yeah, A rocker, US 10 and above is about what I'd say. Maybe
Yeah,
just a little bit further north than that. Skylar asks, a little off topic here about weather myths, but Skylar asks, does slim, shear, lift, instability, moisture affect winter storms? And the answer is
absolutely.
it absolutely does. Yes. Now shear, not much in the way we know. Shear's not really. We toss that one out. We need lift. Yes, that helps our updraft. We need instability. We don't get a lot of it in wintertime, but any instability does help snowfall rates and even some lightning sometimes.
Yep,
And then
especially on
moisture.
lake effect.
Moisture is the most important. Lift and moisture are your two big ones in wintertime.
Yep.
How come lower Michigan will get more snow than up north? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Typically speaking, in Michigan, up north gets the most amount of snow. The UP can get 150 to 300 plus inches of snow. For example, when Detroit gets like 35 to 50 inches of snow per year. So
yeah, with the exception of far western Michigan, like your Traverse City, and then Barron County, where you're close and prone to lake effect snow, you can get some enhancements there, but generally more in the north and less in the south.
and if you're going back to our snowbelt comment, we're including the UP up there. So like Mount Pleasant North, the UP is included in that snowbelt when we say Mount Pleasant North.
Yep.
We're not just talking about the Lower Peninsula. So I don't see any more myth questions in here. So I'll go ahead and get to the next one on our list. And that is, can lightning strike the same place twice?
I guess before we answer that, what do you guys think on that? You know, we've all heard the tale, you know, lightning never strikes the same place twice. So if it strikes once there, well, you're good to go. You know, you're not out of the woods. You're not in danger anymore. I guess, what do you guys think on that? Does lightning ever strike the same place twice?
Professor says my tree would say yes.
My tree would say yes. I think a lot of people are surprised. The answer is yes. Lightning can strike the same place twice. Buildings are a prime example of that. I mean, skyscrapers, they're higher up. Lightning is lazy. It likes to take the fastest and most convenient route to the ground. You have really on lightning forms when you have a ground current that reaches up from the ground, and you have discharge from the cloud that comes down, and they meet in the middle. And that's when you get your, it's called a return stroke. That's that bright flash that you see basically in the picture here behind common weather mist. That's a return stroke. That's where you see that flash, and then thunder obviously follows. But lightning's lazy. So oftentimes, you know, trees are a prime target, telephone poles, anything that's a good conductor or sticks higher up above the ground allows that charges to meet and have that return stroke a lot quicker. But we actually have a video here, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of you just how many times lightning can strike before it's done. So, Ryan, go ahead and play that, and we'll... So the answer is definitely yes. I mean, if you saw there in that video, that was one lightning bolt. However, it struck the same place 8 times in a fraction of a second. So lightning is very dangerous in that sense too.
Another one we can talk about is, should you open your windows if there is a tornado coming? What do you guys think about that one? A Rocker says no. Professor, no. Easton says no. If you've ever been in a skyscraper when it's been struck by lightning, it is an experience. I want to hear about that, Kevin, eventually.
I do too.
Everybody says no, 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 no. So the answer is no. Now the common saying, I guess, is you should open your windows because the tornado will miss your house because it causes a pressure difference. It's false. It's completely false. A tornado that has 150-mile-an-hour winds is not going to care if your windows are open. It's just not going to do it. So there is no scientific method to that madness.
But when that myth was created, you know, there is very limited knowledge on tornado formation and just what a tornado exactly was and what forces were at play. Like even in Palm Sunday of 65, that was a common practice, and it was actually preached to do that. Just because we didn't know how a tornado worked. Today, moving forward in 2024, we know that opening your windows is a terrible, terrible idea just because you want as many objects between you and the outside as possible, as many walls and barriers. So opening your windows is really not only allowing the wind to get inside your home, which is a bad thing, but it's also allowing other debris to get into your home a lot faster too. So it's actually creating a more dangerous environment. So you're better off leaving them shut.
So A Rocker has a good one that we're going to go into next, but he already got it. Overpasses are bad in a tornado. So that's a very, very good topic to talk about here. The next one we had was, should you take shelter under a highway from a tornado? And the answer is no, you shouldn't. And the reason being, when you're underneath that overpass, those winds can tunnel underneath that overpass and it can enhance the winds even further. So, in most cases, like hailstorms and stuff like that, I mean, yeah, I guess you're okay. But when like windstorms, tornadoes, don't do it. Don't do it. And you shouldn't stop in general, period, under an overpass, just because when you stop, especially if there's hail or heavy rain, it's going to cause people behind you to slow down. That could cause accidents. We've seen it time and time again. We had one out in Oklahoma, I think, earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people stopped under overpasses. Next thing we know, we had like a 50-car pile up there. It's not a good place to do it. Even if there's hail or heavy rain, it's just not a good place to park.
Yeah, when a tornado actually moves over an overpass, this is actually the one thing if you've seen the movie Twisters, they actually got this right. When the character was sucked out underneath, that can and does happen if you park under an overpass, just because the same factors are at play that also allows airplanes to fly. That overpass actually amplifies the air movement below and above the bridge to where it creates a wind tunnel and a vacuum. It will actually suck you out underneath. It actually amplifies, it increases the wind speeds underneath of there, making it a lot more dangerous to be during a tornado. We are actually trained that, let's say Ryan and I are out chasing and we get in an instance to where there's no way out. In worst case scenario, a tornado is coming, we are actually safer to go lay in a ditch out in the open than we are to be in an overpass. And I would 100% rather lay in a ditch than be under an overpass, just because it only takes maybe even a half an inch of dirt higher than your back if you're laying flat. And you have a very high survival rate just because the wind speeds are so fast. They'll go right over top of you and they don't have time to get underneath of you to suck you out. Because if you're laying in that ditch, the winds will go right over top of you and they don't have time to create that vacuum like they would whether you're in your car or an overpass. A ditch is actually a very safe place to be during a tornado. Now, you are at risk for flying debris. Now, you could get hit with debris, but in terms of being sucked out, your chances of survival are a lot higher.
If there is no low-lying area or ditch, the NWS does recommend that you put your seatbelt on in your car and then as low as possible and cover your head.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in your car, I mean, I know a lot of you guys are going to say, I don't want to go to a ditch. I mean, I feel the same way. You know, and honestly,
it's a bad situation. No matter
a hard choice. Yeah. I don't think you can really make that decision until you're actually in that situation.
Yeah.
But the ditch is safest by theory. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. But if you happen to be stuck in your car, as low as you can, cover your head, put your seatbelt on.
Yep.
Another one I have tonight. This is more of a true or false for you guys, but it's also a very common misconception. True or false, guys? Tornadoes and lightning are the leading killers among weather. So we're talking like any type of weather. It could be lightning, tornadoes, could be flooding, could be heat. It could be anything weather related, cold, snow, accidents in the snow, stuff like that. So true or false, tornadoes and lightning are the number one leading killer. Skylar, Julie, A-Rocker, everybody's saying no. Holy cow. Everybody's saying no. A-Rocker says flooding. So Easton says flooding, and the answer is it's false. So lightning and tornadoes is not the leading killer. It's also not flooding. Cindy says lightning. It is not lightning. It's neither lightning or tornadoes. There you guys go. Janelle, Julie, Dawn, heat. Heat is your number one killer among weather phenomena. Heat. It's not tornadoes. It's not lightning. It's not wind. It's not snow or cold. It is your heat. And that is also why you see a lot of us on MSC. You'll see a lot of our posts during these heat indexes and stuff like that. You'll see us push information like crazy on it. And it's like, oh, well, we're used to 105-degree heat. Well, it's the leading killer, and it really needs to be taken more seriously. I know a lot of us younger people, we can handle it, but there's a lot of elderly and also a lot of younger people, kiddos, toddlers that just cannot tolerate that high of heat. So yeah, it is 100% heat. It is not tornadoes. I'm sorry if I confused you guys if I said lightning or tornadoes. I meant lightning and tornadoes as a whole question. I didn't mean one or the other. So I apologize for this confusion there. And yeah, there's a lot of us in here who have heat intolerance too. So myself included. So I cannot do heat. I can't do heat. If I go outside in the 100-degree heat, it's done. I'm done. So another one we have here. Now, this is a good one that I actually learned pretty recently. And my parents are guilty. My parents are probably watching this. I know my dad is. He's here in chat. But this is a very common misconception about the cold weather. And that is cold weather makes you sick. That is false. Now, it can weaken your immune system. It can do that. But cold weather by itself does not make you sick. That is a very common misconception among wintertime. And I was lied to my entire childhood. Put your coat on, Ryan, you're going to get sick. You have to have a virus to get sick, bacteria or a virus of some sort. So,
all right. Any other myths or wives' tales you guys hear about that you want us to dive in here? We have a few more that we can talk. But if you guys have any in particular, that your grandparents passed down to you, that you know of, or that you've just heard of but you don't know, feel free to put them in chat. One more we'll talk about here while you guys are putting your questions in the chat is oftentimes, we hear, especially during severe weather events, is that, well, a tornado warnings, yeah, they get issued from my county, but I'm safe because I'm on the other side of the river. They don't cross the river. Or I'm right next to the lake, and well, that lake just makes them disappear or evaporate. They don't touch water. Or I'm in a city. They don't go through cities. I mean, the skyscrapers they dissipate them every time. Well, that is actually false. Tornadoes actually cross rivers every year, and a prime example of that actually happened this year. There's a few tornadoes in Michigan that cross creeks. Portage was a good one. It crossed Portage Creek twice. But if you look back in Indiana, this is actually from March 14th.
No, this is actually not. The video we have is from Lake George.
Oh, that one? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we have the DAT one from March 14th. But here's a video from Lake George of a tornado that actually went right over the lake, and you'll see that here.
Oh, they don't like there. Never mind that, Ma. I gotta get you out of here.
You gotta get to safety, Grandma.
I know. No, you don't. I can only move so fast.
And that is the Lake George EF1 tornado that occurred back in, I want to say June. I think it was June. I had it written down here. It was back in June. I think June 5th or something like that, June 15th. But yeah, it is a very common misconception. And as Caleb was talking about, there was actually one down in the southern part of Indiana on the Ohio River that actually crossed from Indiana, crossed the Ohio River into Kentucky. We had a video on our regional page of that earlier this year, but we don't have that one to show you guys, unfortunately, tonight. But that's just another prime example of why a lot of people have these misconceptions like, oh, it's not going to happen. It's going to, stop the river, the lake, or whatever. Tornadoes do not care. They do not care.
And a lot of that is because, just the processes that form a tornado are so much larger than the obstacles in its way. They go so much higher and so much larger than that. And it's just another obstacle. It's no different than crossing a field for a tornado, unfortunately. So just because you're in a metropolitan district or next to a lake or a river does not necessarily mean you're out of the woods for a tornado, just because they do cross rivers, they do cross lakes. And unfortunately, sometimes they do hit metropolitan areas as well. I mean, we saw that in Gaylord a couple years ago. That was a pretty big metropolitan area to get a direct hit from a tornado. And
Portage,
Portage too. I mean, they do happen.
Kevin has a good one. Do cows lying down indicate poor weather? And the
Yeah, I
answer
think
to that one
everybody's
is
heard that one. Yeah.
the answer is no. There is no indication of that at all. This is all based on scientifically speaking. Of course, they're going to have, oh, my cows are always lying down when there's rain coming. Okay, that may be, but there's actually no correlation between that. But I do believe that animals do have some amount of instinct as well. I don't think lying down is the proper instinct, though. I wouldn't correlate that. You know, there's no scientific evidence to do that, to link those two together, Kevin.
But
Easton.
animals are also very smart too. They can sense pressure differences too. I know a lot of you guys have dogs, and a lot of times dogs will start acting a little bit differently when storm systems arrive or during wind events or thunderstorms. You know, they can sense those coming. They have elite senses that we don't have as humans, and a lot of times animals can sense pressure changes and changing of the seasons too. I mean, look at our
And so-
migratory birds. They
so can
instinctively
humans.
know when to leave ahead of a cold front or ahead of a cold snap. I mean, here in Michigan, our sandhill cranes. Now, it's been warmer this fall, so a lot of them are still hanging around in your backyard. They haven't moved south yet towards Florida, but they probably will be here soon during our next few cold fronts. But yeah, they're an example of a migratory bird that just knows when it's going to be getting cold.
Another thing we could talk about with that too is the human body can sense pressure changes as well. In fact, a lot of people complain about pressure headaches and stuff like that when there's systems coming through.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a thing. Not everybody's going to experience that. So if you see somebody who says, "Oh, I felt it coming on," believe them, because we can sometimes. We call them human barometers. We can feel sometimes when we have systems coming in. We have headaches, our bones hurt, stuff like that. That is absolutely a thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with atmospheric pressure or changes in pressure. Our bodies just react differently, and everyone's different in that way too. Some are more susceptible to that than others, and it's just a part of what makes us very unique, very cool.
So Skylar has a question here. We're going to address it once. I don't want discussion on this topic because we're pretty strict on this whole thing, but talking about contrails. Now, contrails are what you see in the sky when planes travel around airports, stuff like that. That is exhaust from the jet when the temperatures in the atmosphere are cold enough for it to hang in the atmosphere and suspend. And sometimes it'll spread out. There's a lot of pressure, temperature stuff going on up there. That is a false myth. So no, that is not true, Skylar. But yes, there are contrails up there from exhaust from planes. Kevin says they usually lie down for warmth. I'd say so.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, a lot of animals. Paramom says horses winter hair starts growing. I can tell the cold is coming. And yeah, a lot of animals actually have winter coats and summer coats. Buffalo, a lot of your bovines, equines, a lot of your horses, a lot of your cows, they do have winter fur and summer fur. They'll shed that winter fur come March and April, getting ready for the warmer months. And right now they're really putting it on just as a natural thing to do. That's just part of their biology. It's instinct. I mean, they naturally do that ahead of winter. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad winter or anything like that. It's just all part of their natural programming, so to speak. So Easton says, did you ever cover that tornadoes can and do go over hills and sometimes mountains? We didn't really speak on mountains or hills. We did, however, speak on rivers and lakes. But just as they can cross rivers and lakes, I mean, you can get tornadoes in the mountains. Look at this summer. We had one out west. I forget where exactly it was at, but it was several thousand feet up in the air. I can't remember what plateau it was on, but it was up there, and not necessarily very common. A lot of that is not necessarily because tornadoes don't like mountains. It's just because the mountains are in a place where not everything comes together for tornadoes to develop. The mountains actually encourage tornado development or enhance tornado development out in the plains. You have cold, drier air coming down off the mountains into the plains, and that means colder air from Canada and warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why we get tornadoes across the plains in the Midwest and not in the mountains. Not because the mountains interfere with it, which they do a little bit, but just because we don't have everything coming together out west for tornadoes to occur. But they can influence micro details or mesoscale details down at the surface that can help prohibit tornadoes, but not entirely make them impossible. They can happen, just not as often.
Skylar asks, is heat lightning real?
Very good question.
And it's actually a very easy question to get confused. So heat lightning in and of itself is not real. However, you are seeing lightning. It's just not heat lightning. So the common misconception is you're seeing lightning you can't hear from a distance. That's all it is, basically. It's not. It is always associated with a thunderstorm. That's the big thing. Some people say, oh, it's just phantom lightning over there in the field or whatever. It's with a thunderstorm. It's just many miles away, and you can see lightning from hundreds of miles away. We had a couple nights back in summertime. We were seeing lightning. I was seeing lightning from storms up in Grand Rapids. I'm 200 miles away from Grand Rapids, so it's definitely possible. But
in the summertime, keep in mind, you have those daytime pop-ups. They're real small, isolated. They pop up like little bubbles, not widespread. But they're most commonly seen at night. That's because it's not that lightning doesn't occur during the day. It's just light travels so far after dark and can traverse long distances to where you can actually see that very far away. Yep. And you're actually seeing that at the top of the clouds. A lot of times, that's where you're seeing that really far away. And the reason you can't hear it is because it's so far away. Light travels a lot farther than sound.
Mm-hmm. Another thing we have here is, does green sky indicate hail or tornadoes? That's on our list, actually. And it's a good question. And there's still, honestly, some uncertainty with it. But at the end of the day, there's no direct correlation. But there are some theories. One being just the rain tinting the atmosphere. Some say the hail tints the atmosphere. But green skies typically indicate a thunderstorm is there, yes. But does it indicate tornadoes or hail directly? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I've seen green storms that produce no hail, no tornadoes. I've also seen some that do.
A lot of times it really comes down to the moisture in the cloud. How deep is that convection? How tall is it? And how much moisture is associated with it? So think of it this way. It's the same process why we see, why the sunsets and sunrises are red and not blue. It's all about refraction and just light scattering in our wavelengths. Our deeper, darker colors have longer wavelengths versus our lighter colors. And when you have a really tall, robust thunderstorm that has a lot of moisture, that's like acts as a big filter, and it actually filters out a lot of those shorter, brighter colors and only allows, your darker, longer wavelengths to come through. And greens are a deeper, longer wavelength. And a lot of times that's why we see them appear dark blue, black, green. It's just because it's such a deep, condensed thunderstorm with a lot of moisture that actually filters out a lot of that light. And that's another main reason why we see green skies ahead of a really heavy thunderstorm. Now, does it necessarily mean hail and tornadoes? No, it just means you have a really tall thunderstorm coming your way.
Julie has a good one. You shouldn't go to the bathroom when there's a thunderstorm. That's actually true. That is absolutely true. And that is because lightning, if there's a thunderstorm around, lightning could hit outside a pipe or whatever. It travels through that pipe. If you're in the shower, that is absolutely true. You should avoid using water, showering, and so on and so forth if there's a thunderstorm nearby. Yes.
And that kind of goes into what Lima asked too. What's the difference between lightning flashes and power surges? Well, lightning in itself is an electrical current. It's an electrical discharge. So it's electrical current that's being discharged out as the atmosphere is trying to find balance. You have that electrical separation. The charges are really building up. The same, it's a frictional charge. Just like you rub your balloon on your hair stands up, you have that charge separation until you tap somebody and you get shocked. It's the same thing that's happening in the atmosphere. But however, you don't necessarily have a power surge every time you have a lightning strike. In order to get a power surge in your house, lightning needs to strike close, if not striking a telephone pole. And that's because telephone poles, and more importantly, the telephone cables, are a conductor. That metal is a good conductor, and that lightning, those 500,000 volts and thousands of amps, rush down that line trying to find somewhere to go. They're just going to keep going until they find somewhere to discharge. And, unfortunately, if your house is close by, that can be your house. And that's why a lot of houses and transformers on telephone poles have surge protectors or limiters that help prevent against lightning surges. Just because they're so powerful, they can cause fires, they can blow your electronics, they can cause quite a bit of damage. But in order to have that, you have to have lightning striking a utility pole and getting into the grid. And you can have brief pulses where that energy is being discharged. And that's why you can't go. I would not recommend taking a shower either, just because lightning can actually, the current or electrical discharge can travel through your pipes. Even if lightning doesn't strike a utility pole and it strikes the ground, that ground discharge is very powerful. And especially if the soil is wet too. I mean, it can travel in the soil for quite a ways around a lightning bolt. And you can get what's called an indirect shock, where you may not get hit by lightning, but you can feel the effects far away from the lightning just because of that lateral discharge in the soil itself. So lightning is very dangerous and needs to be respected.
Ashley asks, true or false, you're safe in your car during lightning?
So
you are actually, for the most part, yes.
And that is because, as long as your windows are up.
Yep. And that's because the shell of the car will protect you. It also helps that your tires are rubber. It kind of grounds everything out there as well. So
yep,
that's true. You are safe. You are safe in your car for the most part. Of course, you wouldn't want to be struck by lightning in a car. I don't think anybody would, but
no,
you should be fine, physically speaking.
Yep. Now, can it cause damage to your car? It can. Yeah. It can cause some instrumentation, some electrical damage to your car, to your instruments, sensors, etc., especially on newer cars. But if your car happens to get struck by lightning as you're driving, you'll probably see a bright flash. But you should be okay, just because your car acts as a shield. Your car is a good conductor. So that lightning is going to travel in and around and over the car and into the ground, and then discharging into the ground or into the roadway. So that's why you're okay. Same thing in airplanes too. Airplanes get struck by lightning every year as they fly through thunderstorms and get to higher altitude. But in the same way, the current actually travels in and around the airplane and then down to the ground. So same thing here in your car. So you're actually safe in an airplane just as you are in your car during lightning.
One we can talk about as well is rings around the sun or the moon indicate rain. And that is actually partially true. Mm-hmm. Usually it just means there's incoming moisture around. I think Caleb can go into a lot more in depth about this, but yes, it can indicate rain is incoming when you see rings around the sun or moon.
Yeah, and the reason for that is, the upper parts of the atmosphere is a very dry, that's the desert of the atmosphere. Not a lot of moisture up there as you go higher up in the atmosphere. I mean, you're talking 30 to 35,000 feet. You're ways up there. And when you see, we've had a lot of halos and sundogs here recently. We've had a lot of pictures come in, a lot of chats come in. And the reason we see those or how they develop is we have to have moisture. Oftentimes in what's called cirrus clouds, those are our thin, wispy clouds in the upper part of the atmosphere, or cirrostratus clouds. That's like a wispy blanket to where you can still see the sun through the clouds, but it's like a thin film across the upper parts of the atmosphere. Those cirrus clouds are made up of ice crystals. A lot of times you see those ahead of weather systems coming in. There's a myth out there, hey, there's cirrus clouds, it's going to rain the next 36 hours. That's partially true, partially not. But the reason we see that is because ahead of frontal systems, ahead of cold fronts, you have that draw northward. You have that moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, and that brings our upper level moisture in. That brings more ice crystals into the equation, and that's when we get sundogs, sun halos, because just like a rainbow, when sunlight hits a raindrop, it refracts into a multitude of colors, and we get that diffraction, or it acts as a prism, so we get that diffusion into colors. The same thing happens in ice crystals. The sunlight hits those ice crystals, they refract into visible light, And we get halos or rings around the sun, and even the moonlight too. If it's bright enough, we can get a white ring around the moon too. So oftentimes that is a indication that there's a cold front on the way. Not necessarily rain, but a frontal system or a boundary of some kind, as we do have that increased moisture way up there in the upper parts of the atmosphere.
So Julie asked me a question here. What do we do if a power line falls on our vehicle? Can it electrocute you, or does the shell protect you? So Julie, the answer is you're fine in your car if the wire on top of you.
Do not
get out. Absolutely do not get out.
Yeah. The best
Stay in
advice.
Your car, 911.
Yeah.
Wait. Do not touch anything. Just stay right where you're at.
And the reason for that is those power lines are live. Chances are they're live. And so if you get out, you're now part of the current. That current's no longer traveling across you. It's now going through you to ground itself to the ground. I mean, electricity wants to be grounded. It wants to find a way to the ground, and you don't want to become part of the current. It only takes a half an amp to be lethal to an adult person. And if you look at those power lines, they're carrying a lot more than a half an amp. There's a lot more volume of electricity moving through those cables. And so just relax, stay calm. Most importantly, stay calm. Don't panic. Call 911, have them shut the power off, and have a local fire and rescue come and help you get you out without being electrocuted. So that's the best bet there. Stay calm, call 911, let them know your location, what's going on, and most importantly, that you're okay. And someone will shut the power off for you. But yeah, really, really good question. And hopefully that's a situation that none of us ever have to worry about. Christina asked a good question, or really a concept here. Really bright moon and clear sky means really freezing temperatures overnight. And there is some truth to that, especially in our winter months. Clouds can actually act as a blanket. They can trap a lot of that latent heat that is stored in the ground during the day and can actually keep our nighttime temperatures relatively warm, especially in the wintertime. When you have a clear sky, all that latent heat is then dispersed into the cloud or into the sky, and cold air sinks and takes its place. But when you have a cloud deck or a low cloud deck, that latent heat hits the clouds and it's reflected back down. It acts as a blanket. So yeah, cloud cover can actually keep us a little bit more mild in the wintertime, and even in the summertime too, to some extent. So yeah, good observation there.
Isaac asks an off-topic question about what was our favorite storm chase ever.
Ooh.
You know, honestly, I'm gonna have to say it's the Aurora. I don't think any tornado or storm could outdo it. But that's just me. If I had to pick a storm-related storm, probably back on June 22nd of 2020, and that was in Indiana. I got one of the best shelf clouds of my life. I also heard a very eerie hail roar in Indiana, and also got to see a few wall clouds try to produce tornadoes, but didn't produce tornadoes. That was a good 6-hour chase in Indiana back. I want to say it was June 22nd or 25th or something like that. June 26th, 2020.
Yeah, for me, that's just a loaded question. It's so hard to pick just one. I mean, I'm with Ryan on the Aurora. I mean, this year, we've just been so lucky with Aurora events being so pronounced. Before this year, I'd never seen them overhead to this extent before ever. And having the opportunity to see them come overhead or just right next to you is a very awe-inspiring and very humbling moment. And it makes you feel really small too. But it's when you see an Aurora, I mean, it's just like gold fever. I mean, you just become hooked and you just want to see it night after night after night. I mean, you just can't get enough. And you know that you're going to be getting tornadoes or chasing severe weather every year, but you may not get Aurora every year to this extent either. And that's what makes it really cool, just because we're in this window of solar maximum. And you know it's not going to be solar maximum forever. I mean, it'll eventually be Maunder minimum, and you won't get the aurora like we have right now. So being able to chase that and take advantage of that is really worthwhile to me anyway.
Plus, no one gets hurt.
Yeah, exactly. No one gets hurt. It's a gentle chase. So you find a spot in the dark, you park, and you just look at it. You just observe it. And you save gas too, so that's a plus.
Any more questions or old wives' tales you guys want us to talk about, confirm, deny? Let us know in chat. We got about another 10 minutes or so with you guys. We'll hop out of here, but great chat tonight, guys. As always, we enjoy hopping on here, and really love you guys hopping in here and taking your time and talking with us. We really appreciate that. We enjoy it. Every second between a lightning flash and thunder is 1 mile away. True.
Yep.
True. Lightning flash, you start counting 1, 2, 3. It strikes at 3, or if the thunder hits at 3 seconds, it's about 3 miles or so away. Or sorry, no. 5 seconds is 1 mile. Correct?
I'd have to double check that.
Is it? It's 5 seconds per mile. I'm pretty sure. It's been a while. I haven't had severe weather in a while, so.
Rumbus asks, any questions? I'd love to know about aurora and waterspout chances. Waterspout chances, we are in the peak of waterspout season for the state of Michigan right now. Near term, I don't really see too many, I guess, quote-unquote waterspout outbreaks. You really need a cold core system to move over the lakes. That cold air moving over the warm waters creates surface instability, a lot of lift, a lot of moisture that helps to form those waterspouts over the lake. We just need a good one for that. In terms of aurora, Ryan, you want to go into that?
Yeah, so tonight there is a chance of aurora. We're currently watching our satellites in space. Right now, we're not seeing anything imminent. So we'll see if it hits tonight. There is a G1 watch in effect, which would mean aurora possible north of about Mount Pleasant or so. So UP north of Mount Pleasant in Lower Michigan. But right now, nothing is imminent.
Easton has a good point down here. I heard a myth that.
Caleb, before you go into that, I want to make a clarification here. So Crystal asked, is the 7th still a good chance for the aurora? Oh. So if you're going off of the aurora forecast dashboard, keep in mind the 7th has started about an hour ago because their forecasts are what they call Zulu time or UTC time, and that means at 7:00 p.m. and every day at 7 p.m. is the start of a new Zulu day, so to speak. So we're currently in the 7th, and that is when the watch for the aurora from the SWPC is in effect. So currently that is right now. So bump it up a day or so, basically.
Yep.
But yes, there is a chance tonight, but right now not looking too good right now. Sorry, Cam, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. I didn't see that comment there, so I apologize about that. Easton asks, I heard a myth that there's a specific corner that's safest in the basement for a tornado, which I don't think is true. Really, if you're underground, that is already the safest place you can be during a tornado. Underground is always the safest place in a tornado. Now, if you can't get underground, now the safest place to be is the most interior room you can get. You want as many walls between you and the outside as possible, and that's because tornadoes, when they hit your house, they start working from the outside in as they move. And so not only do the outside walls protect you from flying debris, but they also protect you from the winds too that are trying to break down those walls as well. So as many layers between you and the outside is the safest place. And if you're in a basement, I know whether it's finished or unfinished, as long as you're underground and you find a location, really a corner is probably the best. Out in the open in the middle of your basement is probably not the wisest idea. And that's just in case you get a really strong tornado that actually takes your floor off above your head. You know, you're now exposed. So if you can put yourself next to a wall or a corner in the basement, that's probably the safest play there. But But hopefully no one's ever in a situation here where we get a tornado like that. So, but basement's always priority number one. If you can have a basement or have a basement that you can go to your basement every time. Otherwise, the innermost part of your room. Bathrooms are also a really good place too. I know there's a comment in here asking about, pipes, are they safe to hold on to? Bathrooms are actually very safe, and that's because a lot of times your plumbing goes underground, under your concrete foundation, and so it's deeply rooted. So if you're in a bathtub, for an example, if you have an inner bathroom, go in there, lay in the bathtub, but put a mattress or something over your head to protect you. But chances are that bathtub will still be there just because it's tied to the plumbing underneath the ground. So a lot of damage surveys and photos that we see, your bathrooms are still there.
That's true, but also got to think as well, there's a chance you could get struck by lightning as well or get electrocuted because of lightning situations as well. So keep that in mind. Yep. That's the trade-off. Honestly, I'd probably do it. So I'd probably get a bathtub.
I would do it as well.
Because the overall chance of getting struck by lightning through the plumbing or something, it's quite low. I'd rather take my chances and be safe from a tornado than risk getting struck by lightning, if that makes sense. So it's a trade-off there. It's okay, Crystal. I don't know if I wanted to clarify that, make sure you weren't confused there. Just because the 7th, a lot of people get confused about the dates and UTC time. It's confusing. I just wanted to clarify. So.
Yeah, the southwest corner of your basement, Kevin. That's honestly where I would go, and that's just because tornadoes travel from southwest to northeast, or east to west historically, and just naturally, just because the environment at play, that's what our wind directions are. So naturally, that's probably where I would be as well.
Hannah asks, I have a built-in room I have built in my basement a few years ago. Is that safe? Yes, I'd say go. Yep. Basement's your number one priority, but if you have a room in your basement, that's even better because you have more walls between you and the outside.
Yep.
So that's your best choice. Yes.
Yeah. Think of it in terms of layers. How many layers do you have? How many walls? And that goes for above you and around you too. You want to be in the center, most place you can get. So, yep, perfect spot.
What was the last tornado that was strong enough to pull up subfloors in Michigan?
That's a good question.
Probably Gaylord.
I would say so.
I mean, we could sit here and go house by house on the damage survey that NWS has done and look at pictures, but I would say the strength of tornado. I mean, Portage destroyed quite a few buildings, but I don't think any houses got leveled to a point where you're at the subfloor. Gaylord, there's a few houses that did get pretty well leveled.
Yeah, and you have to look at the construction too. I mean, it's not exactly a fair question just because you can have a weak tornado, an EF1, EF2, go down to the subfloor depending on your structure. Just because if it's a weak structure, you're talking your prefab homes, your mobile homes, your older houses, just weaker structures. It's all about how they were constructed. You can have different ratings on their house. You can have a house rated for 80 mile an hour. You can have a house rated for 120 mile an hour. It just depends on what construction methods and materials were used in the construction as to what it's rated for. So really depends on the strength of your tornado, but probably most recently I would have to say Gaylord.
Actually, I'm going to correct both of us here. Easton makes a great point in chat. Colin Sherwood tornado on May 7th of this year actually did that to a house. And I'm going to try and work to get that pulled up here to show you guys.
Oh, is that the one with the porch still there?
Yeah, that exact one. So give me a second. I'm going to pull that up.
I do remember that one.
We actually discussed this last podcast. We went tornado by tornado, looking at damage pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this particular house here in the Colin Sherwood tornado, that's one of the pictures. Hold on, let me find the correct one. It may not be this one. Yeah, there it is. There it is. That is a foundation in the basement of a house. And as you can see, there's no flooring there. So good point out there, Easton. I completely forgot about that one.
But again, as we dive into it here, you can tell it was a weaker structure. Look at the construction and how it was made. You can see it was a little bit of a weaker structure because one, you can tell it's not a really strong tornado. A lot of people would look at this and go, "Oh, well, that's EF5. I mean, the house is gone." But if it was truly an EF5, that pool wouldn't be there in the background. Those bushes wouldn't be there in the background. Nothing would be there. It really comes down. This is why sometimes it takes a long time to to fully get a full rating on the tornadoes because your National Weather Service and engineers are working together. Okay, what was this house rated for? What methods were used when it was built? Are the stud walls toe-nailed? Are the nails straight up? How was it built? So a lot of stuff goes into rating tornadoes. But again, here, it was a weaker tornado that actually caused subfloor damage. And a lot of that comes down to the type of house and the construction that was used. So, yep.
Thank you, Easton, for pointing that out. I completely slipped my mind on that one.
Julie has a great question here, and this might be a good one here to end the night here. Are anticyclonic tornadoes stronger than typical cyclonic ones? So what she means here, are counterclockwise ones stronger, or are clockwise tornadoes stronger? So here in the Northern Hemisphere, 99.9% of all of our tornadoes are cyclonic. They are counterclockwise. In the Southern Hemisphere, a lot of times they are clockwise. And a lot of that has to do with something called the Coriolis effect. That's a fancy term named after Coriolis, who discovered wind patterns and global wind patterns that affect weather. And so right now, it is counterclockwise tornadoes are stronger ones. That's just because of the dynamics that are at play. You have a lot of physics at play here, and your counterclockwise tornadoes, your cyclonic tornadoes, are your stronger tornadoes in the United States. Now, can we get clockwise tornadoes? Yeah, we can. They do happen occasionally. Generally, they're weaker and they don't last as long, just because there's a lot of physics that counteract that and cause them to weaken significantly. But a lot of times, if you have a satellite tornado, which is you have a parent tornado that is cyclonic, counterclockwise, but sometimes you get a lot of turbulence or eddies that form on the outside of your rotating updraft. As you have, think of it as a river. The atmosphere is fluid, and it acts as fluid. It acts like water. So in a river, you get a fast-moving current, but as you look down, you can see little swirls that are some clockwise, some counterclockwise. The atmosphere acts the exact same way, and sometimes you can get a little swirl on the outside that is clockwise, and you can get a satellite tornado to form, which is clockwise. Generally, they're weak. They don't last as long, but yeah, they do happen.
I was going to give an example here if I could pull this up. I'm not sure if it's actually on radar, but May 7th, the Colin-Sherwood tornado is a great example because there was an anticyclonic tornado on that one. So you had the main EF2 tornado that went from roughly about, what was the town name? Sherwood, all the way up to about Union City. But as the tornado got ready to lift, there was a second anticyclonic tornado to the south of that one that destroyed a barn. I was going to see if I could pull up the radar from this day and actually kind of pinpoint it out. I think it was pretty messy, so we're probably not going to see anything from it. But that's a great example of what Caleb's talking about here. We actually had...
And that was here in Michigan, too. They can happen anywhere. But yeah, generally they don't last as long. But oftentimes they are actually south or beside where the actual tornado would be. Kind of building on the point that Skylar asked, are sister tornadoes real, like in twisters? Yeah, they are. They can happen, and they happen every year. A lot of times they aren't necessarily two separate tornadoes like this incident here, where you have a clockwise one and a counterclockwise one side by side. But a lot of times you get a lot of microphysics inside a tornado where you have something called vortices. They're like mini tornadoes inside the parent tornado where they actually revolve and act as one. So you can have more than one. So there's a lot of physics going on, and that's what makes tornadoes and supercells so complex. And there's a lot of physics at play and a lot of things that have to go right for everything to come together. It's really amazing when you dive into the mesomechanics and just the physical properties that go into a tornado. There's just so much there. It's just a wonder the whole process works at all. I mean, it's really incredible.
All right, so we're not going to leave the radar screen up here for too long because I don't want people to see the stream and think there's something going on here in Michigan. So briefly cover this. This is the look of the Colin-Sherwood tornado. And you can actually see here, here's your main parent tornado, and then here's your anticyclonic circulation over here. So you notice how there's both red and greens here? Reds are going toward the radar, which is this way. Or no, reds are going away from the radar. I got crushed up on my skills, man.
Other way.
So reds are going away from the radar, and then greens are going toward the radar. So you have two separate circulations here. And that's where you get one tornado and the other tornado.
And that's kind of
This
Like
one's your
that
parent.
eddy
This one's your
anomaly
anti-cyclonic.
or analogy I was talking about earlier on how the atmosphere acts as a fluid, acts like a river. If you get a rush of air moving one way and you have that speed difference, sometimes you can get a little embedded circulation in there. There's a lot of frictional forces at play. Kind of like on the leading edge of a gust front, gust nados. I mean, that's friction. You can get little eddies that form, not necessarily tornadoes in that instance, but yeah, there's a lot of physics at play here, and it's very cool.
Well, Caleb, I think we're about ready to wrap it up here pretty soon.
I think so.
I see a question here from Ashley. Is dead man walking on a tornado stronger than a normal tornado? So dead man walking is kind of like a multi-vortex tornado.
Mm-hmm.
And typically speaking, those are associated with stronger tornadoes, yes, but there are other situations where they're not. I will say the first tornado I ever captured in Michigan was a EF0, very weak, very brief in nature, but that was multi-vortex. So overall, I wouldn't say dead man walking automatically means stronger tornado, but it is very cool to see when you take out the human impact of it and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I wouldn't correlate the two together.
Yeah. Well, Ryan's talking about there with a weaker tornado. You don't have a fully condensed funnel all the way to the ground. You have an area of strong rotation in the clouds, but you have little dips of condensated funnels that fully form and touch down, then they lift, touch down. That's multi-vortex. And a stronger tornado, where you get your big tornadoes, you can have something called vortices, and they're actually inside the parent tornado. At the same time, you have a fully planted tornado, and they revolve around that tornado. They can be lateral or vertical, and you can get them in both. So,
all right, I'm going to wrap it up here. About an hour and 10 minutes into this. So just want to say thank you all for joining us. If you are new here, first time, thank you for sticking around. We'll do this every evening or every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. And if you guys want to come back for more, we'll be here next week in case, or unless we have some major severe event, which we don't expect. But overall, we'll be here Wednesday evenings, 7 p.m. So come on back next time. So thanks, guys, for watching. Appreciate you all. We'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you.